A caring nurse untangles a deadly secret after a wealthy socialite falls into a coma, exposing a web of love, betrayal, and murder. Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a psychological thriller from 2023 titled Locked In. The movie begins with a nurse using an alphabet board to communicate with a patient who is unable to speak. It's only through the blinking of her eyes that the patient responds to the nurse. After piecing the letters together, the nurse discovers that someone attempted to murder the patient. Then we're taken back to 5 weeks earlier, when a doctor and a nurse examined the same patient, Catherine. They briefed her that she had suffered from a head trauma, and her brain was damaged, leaving her unable to move. The doctor informs her that she has just woken up after being in a coma for 3 days. Suddenly, a flashback is shown of a speeding car attempting to run her over in the woods at night. After the doctor leaves, the same nurse from earlier approaches Catherine and introduces herself to Nikki Mackenzie. Nikki promises to help Catherine recover and asks her to move her left eye, but she is unable to do so. The nurse is seen meeting with Catherine's relative Lena and explains she's suffering from a locked-in syndrome, meaning there will be no means of communication except blinking. But regarding Catherine, her working eye has been injured and she cannot over it now. Being told this, Lena asks if Catherine will recover, which Nikki responds she will. As they continued their conversation, the nurse asked to know more about Catherine. Lena then recalls a time when she first came to know Catherine, following her own mother's death. Catherine became Lena's guardian, and they began living together in luxury. At that time, Catherine was a rich and famous TV actress, and Lena adored everything about her. However, their relationship became strained when Catherine's husband died and left everything to his son, Jamie, excluding Catherine from his will. This strained their relationship, but Lena loved them both equally and wanted to live as a family. Lena mentioned that she shares a strong bond with Jamie. One day, Jamie had a seizure while playing with Lena, and she called Catherine for help. During their conversation, Lena discovered that Jamie had been chronically ill his entire life, which made him vulnerable and weak. That night, Catherine dressed up beautifully and seemed in high spirits. Curious, Lena asked where she was going. Catherine excitedly shared that she was meeting with a director about a new TV role, her first acting opportunity in 2 years since her husband's death. Later that evening, the two children watched movies and enjoyed a wonderful time together. They shared the fact that both of their biological parents had passed away. It turns out Jamie's mother died when he was an infant, and his father married Catherine afterward. After sharing their stories, the kids made a promise to protect each other. Meanwhile, Nikki and Lena were still talking, and the nurse seemed interested to know more about her patient. She mentioned that everyone was saying Catherine was run over by a vehicle driven by an unknown person, but Lena wasn't too sure about it. Nikki then asked if Catherine was her legal guardian or mother-in-law. Lena replied that their relationship was complicated and began to explain further. The movie then shifts to 3 years earlier, at a time when Lena and Jamie were unexpectedly getting married. Their emotional bond had evolved into a romantic relationship, and while everyone seemed happy for them, Catherine was not. She suspected that Lena was a gold digger, marrying Jamie solely for his inheritance. Though she never expressed these thoughts directly, her sarcastic remarks surely implied it. Later, during the dance ceremony, Jamie suffered a massive seizure, which interrupted the celebrations. When Lena failed to calm him down, the family doctor, Dr. Lawrence, carried him to his bedroom. Lawrence was a general practitioner who only had limited knowledge regarding chronic illnesses. But as he was very close to the family, he had become Jamie's family physician. In the present, a nurse asks Lena if she remembers her, but Lena appears confused. Nikki then reveals that she had cared for Jamie, Lena's husband, when he was ill a few months earlier. Meanwhile, the flashback shows that Lena's relationship with Catherine is deteriorating, and Jamie's health is rapidly declining. He has become addicted to painkillers, and despite Lena's pleas for him to stop, he continues to take them. That evening, Lena decides to swim in a nearby lake to clear her mind. Along the way, she runs into Lawrence and they have a brief conversation. During their chat, Lawrence playfully suggested that Lena should go out more often. However, Lena didn't pay much attention to it as she was preoccupied with taking care of her sick husband. While Lena was relaxing in the water, she heard bells ringing and became alarmed. She discovers that Jamie, who rings the bells whenever he's in trouble, needs her help. Lena rushes back to the manor and finds her husband in an unconscious state. He has suffered from another seizure. In the next scene, Lena takes her husband to the hospital, and Nikki is assigned to take care of him. As the nurse tends to Lawrence, she questions him about the high dosage of painkillers he prescribed for Jamie, a weak patient. Lawrence becomes defensive and angry at the nurse for questioning his standards. This confrontation raises a red flag for Nikki about Lawrence's intentions. That evening, Lena meets privately with Lawrence and shares her frustrations about the current situation. Although she deeply loves Jamie, she confesses that she is becoming exhausted from the constant caregiving. She feels that Jamie doesn't want to get better, noting that he never listens to her advice. Sensing her distress, the doctor suggests that they spend some time together to relax and have fun. He even proposes that she take a short holiday to recharge. Later that night, Lena has a vivid dream about Lawrence. In the dream, they are swimming together in a pond, and just as they are about to kiss, she abruptly wakes up. This startling dream makes her realize that she has begun to develop feelings for Lawrence. Over the next few days, Lena and Lawrence spend more time together, playing tennis and enjoying drinks. One rainy night, when Lena cannot take it any longer, she ends up having intercourse with Dr. Lawrence at their barn. She lets out all her frustration by making passionate love with him. A few days before the incident, the family gathers to celebrate Catherine's birthday. Dr. Lawrence is also invited, and Lena plays a beautiful song on the piano for her mother-in-law. But while she's playing, Catherine notices the way Lawrence is looking at her Lena. Then they cut a cake to make Catherine feel special. But things take a turn when Catherine starts venting her frustrations. She begins talking about Lena's deceased mother, claiming that the woman was jealous of her accomplishments. Lena defends her mom, insisting that she was not a jealous person, and tells Catherine that her mother was 1,000,000 times the woman Catherine could ever be. In response, Catherine reminds Lena that it was she who had taken her in as a legal guardian, and that Lena would have ended up in a foster home if it wasn't for her. Hearing this, Lena becomes angry and decides to leave the table. Before walking away, she asserts that the manor now belongs to her and Jamie. That night, Lena and Jamie get into an argument. She expresses her frustration at how her life has panned out. She can't even leave the house as she has to take care of him. In his defense, Jamie argues that Lena would be nothing without him, even reminding her of her mother's death several years ago. Unfortunately, this only makes Lena angrier, and her love for Jamie starts to diminish. The next morning, Lena meets with her new lover, Lawrence. She tells him that she wants to leave Jamie to be with him, but Lawrence refuses, saying that Catherine would ruin his reputation. However, after Lena promises to do whatever it takes to be with him, Lawrence concedes, but he warns her that they have to be brave. Lena affirms she'll do anything, and they have another intercourse, while we see poor Jamie left alone in his room. In the next scene, Lawrence prescribes Jamie some new medications that temporarily relieve his pain. He then takes him to the pond where Lena is sitting by the dock. Jamie surprises Lena with a picnic basket. He prepared himself so they can enjoy a nice time together. Lena, however, is concerned about her husband's well-being, noting that Jamie isn't strong enough to swim. Jamie reassures her that he will be fine and apologizes for any harsh words he said earlier. The three of them then board a boat, and Lawrence starts rowing. Moments later, Lawrence mentions that he will take them to a small island in the middle of the pond. When they reached a specific spot, Lawrence's odd behavior escalated, making Lena increasingly uneasy. They arrived at the other side of the small island, where Lawrence acknowledged some workers cutting down trees. Suddenly, he threw one of the oars into the water, and while attempting to retrieve it, he deliberately capsized the boat. All three of them fell into the water. Lena tried to save Jamie by grabbing his hand, but she lost her grip as Lawrence pulled him down into the depths of the pond, attempting to make his death look like an accident. Lena was forced to watch helplessly as her husband drowned before her eyes as Lawrence pulled him under. After Jamie's death, the police arrived at the scene. Lawrence presented them with a fabricated version of the events, while Lena, overwhelmed by fear, remained silent and did not contradict his story. Distraught and heartbroken, she could only cry. Later, Catherine arrived at the scene and, overcome with emotion, attempted to jump into the pond, but was restrained at the edge. Despite their strained relationship, she cried bitterly, revealing that still had motherly love for him. Back in the present, as Nikki listens to the story, she grows increasingly suspicious. She begins to suspect that Jamie's drowning was not an accident, but a murder. She questions Lena about why she allowed the boat trip to happen. Suddenly, Nikki probes further, asking how long Lena had been involved with Lawrence. The nurse suspects that they might have killed Jamie to get him out of their way. Lena insists that it was just an accident, but Nikki is convinced there's more to the story. At Jamie's funeral, Catherine and Lawrence were standing in front of the coffin watching as Lena came down the stairs. Catherine takes a glance at Lawrence's face and sees a smile, as if there was a connection between them, raising many questions in her head. After Jamie's death, Lena continues to have nightmares. One night, she wakes up from a nightmare to find Lawrence in her room approaching her and undressing, which leads them to make love. Despite everything that has happened, Lena still trusts him. The next evening, they meet in his car to discuss their next move. Lena is desperate to leave the place and start a new life with him. Lawrence agrees but wants her to sell the house. He believes that doing so will provide them with enough money to start afresh. However, Lena, who still considers Catherine her mother, refuses to sell the house. She mentions that she made a promise never to sell Roland Manor. Realizing that Lena might break, Lawrence takes out her journal, where she had written multiple times about feeling compelled to end Jamie's suffering using various methods. Lena tries to retrieve it, but Lawrence forcefully pushes her back, warning her. He claims that Jamie's death is well documented in the journal, so if she tries to betray him, he will expose her to the authorities. After this confrontation, he finally lets her run away. On a rainy night, Lena looks out from her upstairs window and notices Lawrence's Mercedes in the driveway. Curious about his late visit, she goes outside, only to encounter a shocking scene. Lawrence seducing her mother-in-law, Catherine. Heartbroken, Lena begins to cry uncontrollably, realizing that Lawrence never loved her. He was only after her wealth. Lena returns to her room, grabs a backpack of her belongings, and as she descends the stairs to leave, Catherine blocks her path. Speaking in an aggressive tone, Lena demands she move aside. Taken aback but quickly understanding the situation, when Lena angrily calls her a bitch, Catherine realizes Lena witnessed the seduction. Looking Lena in the eyes, Catherine says, "Cat's out of the bag, is it?" Which leads Lena to slap the grief out of her before storming out of the house. But it's not over yet. As Lena leaves the porch, Lawrence appears, attempting to stop her. Heartbroken, she yells at him, declaring her love and her pain. Lawrence approaches Lena, attempting to explain himself, but she refuses to listen. As she tries to escape, he becomes aggressive once again and pushes her to the ground. Fortunately, Lena manages to run back to her room, where she quickly barricades the door. Lawrence chases after her and reaches her room, trying to break in. Through the crack in the door, Lena sees Catherine standing behind Lawrence, realizing she is complicit in his actions. Lena refuses to give up. She quickly moves into the room next to hers, setting a trap for Lawrence. As he tries to force his way in, she stabs his hand with a fork. Seizing the moment, Lena dashes towards the safe where all the hunting guns are stored. She quickly grabs a double-barrel rifle and cautiously walks down the hall, while Lawrence is still incapacitated from the fork incident. Just then, Catherine appears, attempting to wrestle the gun away from Lena. A struggle ensues, and Catherine ends up pushing Lena down the stairs. Fortunately, Lena isn't seriously injured. She jumps up and runs towards the woods. Catherine, now armed with the gun, mounts a horse and gives chase. Soon after, Lawrence frees himself and starts pursuing them in his car through the woods. Catherine closes in on her, aims her gun, and shoots. The scene shifts back to the present, where the nurse is speaking with Lena, trying to persuade her to come clean, suspecting that she knew Lawrence was the attacker. Just then, the nurse receives a phone call informing her that Catherine can now move her eye, enabling her to spell out words. Excited by this development, the nurse quickly returns to Catherine's room, hoping to gather valuable information that could help law enforcement identify the suspect. Lena becomes worried as she watches Catherine spell out the word murder from behind the door. She meets up with Lawrence to inform him about the potential danger the nurse poses. They decide to kidnap her to keep her quiet. Lawrence brings a wheelchair, and they put Catherine in it and push her toward Lawrence's car parked outside. As they put her in the car and drive off, the nurse steps outside and witnesses them leaving together. When they get home, Lawrence starts preparing a dose to kill her, so the cops can't pin the murder on them. Lena then receives a text from the nurse saying she knows what happened. It was Lawrence who ran her over with the car, while Catherine was trying to save her. Lena distracts Lawrence by sending him to clean any evidence from the car while she listens to the nurse's voice message, which reveals that Catherine was trying to protect her. It is here we see Catherine couldn't shoot Lena. She saw Lawrence closing in as she tried to get away and fired at his tires. The gunshot spooks the horse, throwing her off and injuring her before she can escape. She runs back into the woods, calling out Lena's name until Lawrence finds her. He confronts Catherine, upset that she could have killed him. Catherine pleads for Lena's life, begging him to let her go. She reminds him that he still has Lena's journal and she can't harm them. But then she makes a grave mistake by threatening to report him if he hurts Lena. Lawrence gets back into his car and drives toward Catherine, hitting her violently. Back in the present, Lena faces Catherine and asks her if it's true she tried to save her life, which Catherine responds by blinking her eyes as yes. Lena is now determined to save her mother-in-law. She hides a knife behind her, ready to use it at an opportune moment. When Lawrence returns, he prepares to inject Catherine with the drug, but Lena steps forward and says that she wants to do it herself. He accepts and gives her the injection. Lena then pretends to start the procedure, and once he is distracted, she injects him with the needle instead. This unfortunately doesn't kill Lawrence as the dose is too little for him. He throws her away and proceeds to finish off Catherine. But in the last second, Lena gets up and stabs him with the knife, finally killing him. In the aftermath of this incident, the police arrive at the scene. As they are loading the corpse away, Lena, Catherine, and Nikki watch them from a distance. Lena asks if the nurse will reveal their secret, but doesn't respond. The movie ends as the mother and daughter finally hold hands after a long time. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos.